Hello. Welcome to She Became Visible. I am back in our home in Arizona, and I'm so happy to be here. Weather is perfect. It's perfect. But I wanted to give you a repost of an interview that I did with Rev.Karla. She is amazing. And she was recently a guest on Dan McClellan's show, Data Over Dogma. And I wanted to highlight that and give you a little clip of how articulate she is and how kind and loving and spiritual she is as she talks about her deconstruction. And one of the reasons that I love Rev.Karla is for those of us in the ex-Mormon world, I think that we are the only ones going through deconstruction because the Mormon Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as they want to be known as now, is a very demanding, high demand fundamental religion with a lot of restrictions, a lot of rules, and a lot of perimeters as to what makes you a good member of the church and a not so good member of the church. And this is probably true in a lot of fundamental religions, but the LDS church is the only religion that I really know because I was 12 when my parents joined the church. Before that, we were what I think they call it something like twice a year Methodists. We went at Easter and Christmas. And I don't know, occasionally, we move into a new community and we try out the new church. But so what I learned from the Methodist religion that my family primarily were members of was to pray and to recognize that there was a Jesus Christ. But that was as far as it went. There weren't a lot of restrictions as to what we could eat or what we could wear, or our morality wasn't judged by our appearance. So it was really becoming members of the Mormon Church that our life was completely controlled. And so that's the religion that I know. And so that's the only religion that I can speak of. But Karla really brings all of Christianity together and talks about deconstructing any kind of church that tells you who you are and doesn't give you the privilege of being who you are and finding out who you are on your own. So I want to show this little clip though, because I thought this was really insightful. This is from her interview that she did with Dan and Dan on Data Over Dogma. So let me show you that.
Is both sides. And that is where a lot of people get tripped up. Like, I'm out. I'm not doing deconstructing because I'm going to have to really take a look at some elements of myself that I'm not willing to let go of. Mm-hmm. And so you'll often see people turn away at that point or get really, really mad. I've said this before, and I'm going to make somebody really uncomfortable. But the one person who I have, besides the MAGA person, of course, you're blocking them left and right. But the person I've had to block more often on my accounts on social media is the white Christian woman who thinks she's deconstructing until she gets to a place where she does not realize she's still holding on to a patriarchal privilege and is weaponizing it towards those in whom she's in community with. Mm-hmm. And that does not go well. And it becomes a very, very toxic situation for them. They see that, let's just say it becomes really, really heated. Yeah. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, it is. And it's so interesting to watch as people who aren't even the ones who get the perceived benefits of patriarchy, perpetuating the patriarchal structure and perpetuating the problems of patriarchy, even though they are not the men who are the theoretical benefactor or not benefactors, recipients of the privileges. So when women work hard to perpetuate it, it can be very surprising and very shocking to see.
Very, very much so. And like I said, it's almost easier to call them, to block them than to call them out. Like, oh, here we go.
I thought that was so profound because we were, well, some of us who have left the church continue to really keep close eye on the church because in my case, I have members of my family that are still active members. So I feel as though I have a responsibility to keep on top of the doctrine. The other thing is in the LDS church, the doctrine is changing almost daily. And so it is so mind boggling and head spinning to see doctrine that you grew up with, that I made covenants to obey, that is now being completely thrown out the window. So you have to kind of stay on top of it unless you can completely remove yourself. And those of us that have members of the members of our family that are still members, we cannot completely remove ourselves. But from this last conference that they had, the 1st of October, there were only 2, maybe 3 women that spoke, and they all were perfect examples of what Karla's talking about, where she's talking about the angry women who perpetuate the patriarchy because it is it is who they are. They have been indoctrinated to believe that this is who they are, and they have to. They are in order to be fulfilled as a woman, they have to support the patriarchy. And I thought that that was amazing that she finds that those are usually the only people that she literally has to block from her social media. So let me show you. You can find Rev.Karla at Rev.Karla.com. That's her website. And this is the book that she has just, it's just gone out. It's available for purchase right now. And I really encourage people to read her book, to find Rev.Karla on TikTok, and to listen to her. She's so loving. If you are having spiritual questions and you are really struggling with your belief, Rev.Karla is a safe space. She's a place that you can go to, even if it's just following her on her social media. Her spiritual insight is comforting and kind, and it's a way for you to deconstruct without the anger. She acknowledges anger, but she talks about where it comes from and how to handle it. And I just think she's absolutely amazing. So what I would like to do now is to share the interview that I did with Karla once again with you so that you can have an opportunity to see a little bit more of Karla. So let me turn the time over to Rev.Karla.
You're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
Give me a full ballerina skirt and a hint of saloon, and I'm on board.
I have a hole in my stomach! I can't go back.
Welcome to the She Became Visible podcast. I'm your host, Renee Steelman. This podcast is my story. It's your story. It's our story. It's all the stories of all the women who one day knew that it was time to remember who they were, who they are, and stand up and be seen. Good morning. Thank you for joining me today on She Became Visible. I am so over the moon excited about my guest today. And I want to give you a little preview of coming attractions. I don't remember how I found Rev.Karla, which pretty much is the story of my life. I mean, I look at books that I've read and podcasts that I've listened to. And then when I go to tell someone about it, I'll be, I don't know how I found this person. I don't know how I found this book. But, you know, one thing leads to another. It's the whole rabbit hole thing. But I believe I found Rev.Karla on TikTok. And the first thing that drew me to her, of course, was that she was on TikTok and she was like my age. It's like, yes. And she even dances sometimes. So it's like, yes, I just was so thrilled. But her message was more important than that. And the things that she had to share. And primarily, I'm going to let her tell her story because I just think it's so profound. And it correlates with my story as far as becoming unchurched because of the patriarchy that seems to dominate most religions on this earth. And it's funny because I will reference, and I will tell Rev.Karla, if any of you have listened to Britt Hartley's No Nonsense Spirituality, if you've listened to her last post, she goes through every single religion, Buddhism, Islam, I think everything, every religion that there is here on the earth. And she talks about how it started with the man. This is how he treated women. This is where his spirituality went. And this is what they truly thought of the value of women in each one of these religions, including Buddhism. And it was just so profound. But regardless, I don't want to take up too much time chatting. So let me just give you a little preview of coming attractions, and then I'm going to bring Rev.Karla on. So here we go.
Good morning, beautiful souls. Now, you know I would come here to talk about the He Gets Us commercials last night. And trust me, I had the same reaction you did. But I want you to think about something. Those commercials are not there to change our mind. They know we see through the hypocrisy. They know we know. They are the source of all the anti-LGBTQIA plus legislation. We know that Hobby Lobby is funding anti-LGBTQIA plus legislation. We know that they're the ones that are causing all of these radical laws against abortion. We know all this. Those commercials are intended for Christians. Now, if you go out and just go spend a few minutes out in TikTok land and look at how many evangelical Christians don't like those commercials. They're flat out telling you that's not Jesus. Jesus never washed the feet of sinners. They're going off on them. This is about a rebranding to the moderate Christian because they know that they're out in progressive Christian land. There are people who don't know what to do.
Okay, let me stop it right there. That is just an example of how articulate and educated and the messages that she gives on her TikTok and Instagram and whatnot are just well studied, well backed up with data, and they really relate to people like me and other people that have left a church or a systematic religion because of the patriarchy, the misogyny and whatnot, and also the reinventing of Christianity. So I'm going to stop talking and bring a Rev.Karla on and have her introduce herself, and let's get this conversation going. So there she is.
Hello there. I am so honored to be here. Thank you for this time.
Thank you so much. I think I found you. I don't know where. I know I found you on TikTok, but I remember the most profound one that you gave for me that really stuck with me was you not only talked about leaving a systematic church because of the patriarchy, but also you referenced the culture and the era that you were brought up in. And I remember I was walking through the streets. My husband and I moved to Arizona about 5 years ago. Previous to that, we were in Oregon, and we had gone back for some reason. And so I was walking the streets of Lake Oswego, and they have these cute little shops, and I'm just going from shop to shop, and I've got my earbuds in, and I'm listening to you talk. And you're talking about the time that you would love to go to a coffee shop, and you would go into this coffee shop and find solitude and whatnot. And somebody came up to you and correct me if I got the story wrong. And they said, you know, you'd be a lot cuter if you just smile. And you remember thinking that, of course, because this is how we were trained, of course you went, oh, you smiled, you know, because that's what we were trained to do. And I remember going, that's it. That's, you know, and then you've seen all the other things where people are saying so much about femininity and how far we've come. And I'm like, I'm only 70 years old. I remember going into a bank and not being able to get a credit card, not being able to open up a checking account, not being able to go and buy a car on my own or whatever, because I didn't have a job, I didn't have an income, and I was dependent on my husband. So he had to sign for me. This was in the 70s. It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
So I just think that people don't understand that people that grew up in our era, we were pretty much right there with the Leave It to Beaver whole persona. We also were told to make sure you look nice when your husband came home so that he wouldn't have an affair at the office. And but then you mix that with a Christianity. And, in the Mormon church, when I got married, we went through a temple ceremony. And part of the temple ceremony was vowing and bowing our heads and saying, yes, that we would obey our husbands, that we would honor them, and that we would go through them to speak to God. And so, and of course, as a 20-year-old or 21-year-old, you're like, yeah, okay, sure. Yeah. And I mean, I remember even as a young girl, when I was preparing to get married, thinking, I'm going to be a housewife pretty soon. I'm going to do laundry. I'm going to iron. This is going to be so fun, And I mean, it didn't take very long. I mean, because that's not my personality for me to go, yeah, I don't iron. I don't know where I got that idea.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. But tell us your journey, because I love the fact that you are ordained, you went through seminary, and just tell us where Rev.Karla came from.
Well, thank you. Thank you again for having me here, and I'd be honored. And I love the fact that you just went right for it and dove in and gave me, showed the one video that is probably one of the most, I would say, conversationally with triggers there, because not only am I talking about faith, I'm talking about politics, which I'm not afraid to do so on my platform in any way, shape, or form. Not that I saw that at the beginning, because at the beginning, I truly thought I was leaving church because of my conflicts with faith. And just real quickly, I was raised Southern Baptist, raised by a very heavily influenced by a Southern Baptist grandmother who I adored and still miss to this day. And so being able to also reconcile the fact that I did leave that faith, but also heal to the point where I can circle back and have gratitude for what she instilled in me as far as seeking spirituality. Because I think that's what each generation can do. If we leave a gift of wisdom and yearning to try to be a better version of ourselves, then that will impact humanity. So the places where she may have gotten wrong in what she believed about her faith are the things that we continue to correct if we're open to that kind of change. So that was some of the reconciliation I did with my religious heritage. But I didn't even think about patriarchy being a part of what I was deconstructing from. And you and I had a conversation at the beginning about how this whole thing about patriarchy, how it has impacted us, and how we, the things that you influence that maybe you didn't understand that you were, quote, deconstructing from, even though that's not a word that we really like to put about how we're defining what's happening in our lives. So when I first started to leave, my conflict, it felt like it was a spiritual conflict, even though I can look back now and see that it absolutely was about the structure of organized religion. But I thought when I first left, I brought my baggage with me. So I thought I was a bad Christian. I thought I was going to go to hell. I immediately started looking for another church because it was just it had to be about that church. But luckily, and I say that now because at the time it really hurt, luckily I was indoctrinated in such a high control religion that they had sent letters to area churches warning them about me, saying that I was such a bad person. They warned them. And so I was not welcome at area evangelical churches. And I felt it going in. I felt it like somehow they must have known my face and stuff. And I felt that. And I would sit in the parking lots going, okay, did I imagine that? And later having that confirmed that that's exactly what happened from other people who left the church and saying, they sent letters about you, right?
Wow.
But
Unbelievable.
seeing that, because I was still seeking inside my religious heritage the answers to my spiritual path. But what that did was force me into looking at what was it that was untangled? What was it, this thing I was untangling? And that's what I kept that's how I described deconstructing, was I am untangling from something, and I don't know where this is going to lead me, but I'm going to trust the process. So instead of everything that I had known about my spirituality was me being spoon-fed from the pulpit. I did not have any structured education related to religion or biblical studies. So I wanted to learn for myself. And because my husband was supportive of that journey as well and felt that this was going to lead to something, whether it was just for my own healing journey and that would also impact our family, he was very supportive of my returning to college, which is what I did. So the first place I landed was a biblical college, because I thought Bible, right?
Yeah.
And a year into that, I'm like, I know all this stuff. I do know this stuff. I don't need it through this lens. And then I applied and was accepted into Arizona State University's religious studies. And within the first semester is when I personally lost what I call my spiritual Santa Claus. And what that to me means is that once you are faced with truths that are completely contradictory to what you knew, you can't unknow that. You can choose to turn away from it, but you can't unknow it. So that had me really literally physically on the floor crying, because then I needed to grieve the parts of me that I knew I was losing. It's like the best way I could describe it is a really, really bad relationship. And when you get confirmation that it's really bad, there's almost a relief, but there's also sorrow for what was. And you realize that you are going to be fundamentally changed. And so that is, and I want to pause here and also say that this deconstructing, which is the power word that has been chosen to describe us reconciling our faith and healing from any kinds of religious experience. This isn't about where you land. It's not. Some people do go back to church. Some people go all the way to atheism, but it's about releasing things that no longer serve your highest good. And for each person, that's going to be a different journey. It's going to be different depending on where you started and where your calling is. Because for me, I'm still much a spiritual person. So I do believe in these innate gifts that we have that kind of compel us into the world to find the places where we can serve our highest good and leave some kind of footprint that leaves this place a better place because we were here. Mm-hmm. So that journey then took me on to seminary, which was another conflict, because once again, I'm like, the only seminary I ever heard about was the ones that are through the Christian religious construct. And by that time, after going to studying world religions and doing that work, I knew that was not going to serve me. And finding interfaith and interspiritual seminary was like a lifeline for me. That was like obviously the next journey for me. I just didn't know it at the time when I started looking. So that's how I found One Spirit Interfaith Spiritual Seminary. Interfaith means that you have a respect and an acknowledgement that world religions and traditions all have some meaning and somehow point from their context are pointing people to an understanding of something. Yes, they can have something that's intricately flawed, but it's not ours to judge if it's not part of our religious heritage. It's just saying that there's different ways that people can come together and try to understand the divine. Interspiritual says that you can have a spirituality. It does exist outside the construct or the framework of organized religion. So that's really where I fall, because now, having gone through my deconstructing journey, I now am an unchurched, non-conforming, spiritual but not religious person. And I say non-conforming because I still hold on to elements of my Christian heritage, because I did the work for way too long not to hold on to it.
Mhm.
But I'm non-conforming, meaning I don't make my identity or what I believe about the divine or where I'm going or what salvation looks like contingent upon my beliefs. It's more about our spirituality is more about our human experience and looking at the lessons of Jesus and how they can be applied to the human experience and not be hyper focused about what salvation looks like for us. So that's how I ended up here, and then felt like, all right, let's start writing on social media and see where that lands us. And I think that is when I really started making the connection. I went through all of that before I started realizing. It was when I first started posting on Facebook and got hit really hard by a lot of offended men who kept real. It's like they were waiting on me, and it was just really vile and vitriolic, and yet I was still trying to engage with them and validate my presence. So I actually paused for about 6 months and said, who am I? Why am I doing this? Why do I feel like I have to over explain and exhaust myself? Because I'm not even talking to the people that I want to talk to. I am trying to find validation on people that I left behind. And that's when I started to unpack patriarchy and understand how it's still showing up in my life and how I need. And it was about that time that the man at the coffee shop said, you would be much prettier if you would smile. And I automatically smiled and enraged, like holding my driving home going like, I cannot believe I did that.
Yeah.
Because we don't realize how many places that we are still holding on to patriarchy and how it has wounded us, but also how it, in some ways, we internalize it and think that we owe men in our lives or men in a place of authority an excuse for our existence, that somehow they have to approve of it. So once I was able to work through that, the gloves were off and I went viral on TikTok. The voice that came out of that was much stronger. And that's when I realized I'm going to help people reclaim their spirituality. I'm going to help people who want to remain unchurched and find a spiritual but not religious path. I want them to feel like they don't have to carry the guilt that they brought out of church with them. And I'm going to talk about the dangers of Christian nationalism and why it's important that we understand that that connection with religion, religious patriarchy, and our governmental and institutional patriarchy is blending to create something that is a very real threat to our democracy. Yes. So that's the voice I bring to the airwaves. And my first book will come out the end of this year. It's called Deconstructing, Leaving Church and Finding Faith. So that's my bio in a nutshell.
That's amazing. And, I think the interesting thing about the Christian nationalism is I have friends and family who are politically very right wing. And so they're very much Trump supporters. And when I said to them something about Christian nationalism, because this one person in particular is not a Christian, and he has never, since the time he left home, he has never been a Christian. So he's not familiar with the whole Christian stuff, but he likes the whole verbiage and the rhetoric that's coming out of the Trump thing. And I said, do you understand what Christian nationalism is and who's supporting him? And he said, I don't even know what that is. And I said, see, that's the danger, is you don't understand what's behind all of this. You're just going for this guy that's going to, and this person in particular falls right in the whole white, scared fear that the people of color are going to take over their positions, that they're getting more from this country than I've given. And, I deserve this and I deserve that. And it's just amazing, the blinders where people just get into this, well, I don't really care as long as my 401k stays where it's at. And because I'm really afraid that you're going to take some of my money and give it to somebody else that doesn't deserve it. And so they're like, I don't care. I don't even care. But it's just, amazing. It's absolutely amazing what you're doing. And what I also liked about you is you've kind of given people a path. Like you said, you don't have to go down the atheism thing. You can still keep your spirituality in whatever form you find it or want to find it. And I love, because you don't really, you're not sermonizing. You're not telling people, follow me and come to Jesus, and I'm going to show you how to come to Jesus by following me. That's not even part of your thing. But you remind me a lot of Dan McClellan. Are you familiar with Dan McClellan?
We're mutuals. Yeah. We're mutuals in this space, and we're actually we're being published by the same publisher. So we're very. I'm honored to be in that space with him.
Boy, no kidding. And I love that he's like, I'm not going to talk about my personal belief. I'm not going to tell you where I stand in the Mormon Church, but I'm going to tell you about my biblical scholarship and just the data. I'm going to just talk about the data. And I feel like that's where you come from. It's just like, look, this is just the reality. This is how things are laid out. This is how things are happening. And I love what you said about once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. And that's the thing about the difference, I think, between the people that belong to the Mormon Church versus people that are just evangelical. The Mormon Church is very young. It's 200 years old. And everything was written down. There was just this huge thing for journalism and diaries and things that were kept. So there's actual literary proof of patriarchy and beliefs and teachings. And so it's not like even the Bible that goes 2,000, 3,000 Dead Sea Scrolls. We have a fragment of this, or talking, this was Hebrew, this was Latin, this was Aramaic. It's plain old English in the middle of Ohio. So, so it's hard to say, we don't teach that. It's like, well, actually on page 34, right here, it says.
Right there.
Yeah, right there, And so when you find that out, you just can't, I can't unsee that.
I pause?
So yeah. Oh, you froze for a little bit, but there, you're back. Yeah. So that's the difference between finding out about church history versus Jesus or a Christianity or a biblical belief. This is like, I see some history here of major patriarchy that, like I say, I don't know how you can dispel Jeffrey Epstein and call him a sexual predator and then say Joseph Smith is a prophet of God. Because we're still marrying 14-year-olds and we got all our buddies together and we said, you can have one too, and you can have one. And in fact, you need to have 3 if you really want to go to heaven. And that was just the patriarchy that was going on then. And everybody's like, yeah, that was bad, but he's still a prophet. And I'm like, okay.
So that but that you put in that sentence is so important. And I think it was last year, I think I did a video on it, but there was a pastor here in Indiana who was going to, is that noise on me? I'm sorry.
It's my husband in the backyard moving stuff around.
That's
I got to shut my windows.
My dog is also here, so it shows if he's going to get up and shake. But, not that I'm comparing your husband to my dog, but they both are making noises.
That's right. Yeah.
So there's a situation where an Indiana pastor was going to have to come forth and let his congregation know that he had a relationship with a minor. This ended up what he wanted to call it an affair. So the reason why I'm calling it this is because exactly what he was saying, the words he was using. So he gets up and he talks about his transgressions. The woman, who is now a woman, she's in her 30s, gets up and says, no, I was a child. And I don't want to trigger anybody in your audience. She went on to talk about the violations of her time and how he had groomed her. In the end, she went on to tell her story with one person standing beside her, and she told the story from the congregation. In the end, the entire congregation goes forth to pray over the pastor, while 2 or 3 young women support the woman in the back. because
Wow.
he's going to take a break and he needs to get right with God and because he is a man of God. And and just 3 or 4 women, young women, are back consoling and comforting the victim. If that isn't patriarchy, because I think going back to what you were just saying about Joseph Smith, we don't realize how many places patriarchy has taught us to look the other way,
Right.
or numb out about some of the behavior that patriarchy has taught us to forgive or to just ignore. And if you can tie it to it being the lineage of the divine, then you have no choice but to forgive. And so everything that you know about the forgiveness, you carrying guilt, you carrying shame versus a man of God he's flawless. But yet if he is found to have a transgression, it's because of the sacrifices he makes for the congregation. And then how that transfers down into your life in so many places. When you look out into positions of authority, you can see how it impacts the way you look at political leaders. How you look in your home, and how oftentimes it's the women who carry the guilt for others' faults and transgressions, because that's what we've been trained to do. So
Right.
when something happens, a tragedy happens in your life, or somebody violates you in some way, there's often this response of, what could I have done differently?
Right.
That's an indoctrinated response. That is not a normal, healthy response for a person who has and should have the right to hold on to the victim, not in a way that perpetually hurts our lives, but to claim that so that we can then heal from it and
Right.
hold someone else accountable. We're not taught how to do that. We see it
No.
in the criminal system when a woman reports assaults to religious structures. And when you start to peel back how many places in your life that has impacted you, it can leave you feeling pretty wobbly, because it's like, wait a minute, I'm completely immersed in it. And when you see how women have internalized it and how then they use it towards others,
Right.
to say, okay, Renee, you say you're 70 and you're wearing that bright lipstick.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's really appropriate for a woman your age?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know that there are women out there who have no idea that they are weaponizing a truth that they're holding on to, that they feel then they're entitled to judge you, which, by the way,
Right.
you're fabulous. And I'm looking at you thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to, I need to do more for giving me permission to step into my authenticity that's crying out as well.
Well, it's funny you would say that, because I was listening to Tim Whitaker. I love Tim Whitaker, the new evangelical.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I love his response videos. He was responding to a Mark Driscoll interview with Christopher Kirk. Does that sound right? Anyway, he's another evangelical. And just to let you know, you are a little bit fuzzy. You're coming across here a little bit fuzzy. I don't know if you have some streaming something or anything like that, but you're glitching, I guess, is the thing.
Okay,
But
let me see
yeah, but don't do anything drastic. I don't want to lose you. But anyway, Mark, I guess, has written another book. He's in Phoenix, so I got to stop in on one of his sermons at some point. He's at a church here in Phoenix somewhere. And he was talking about how the demons have never changed. Demons are the same as they were in Kings, are the same as they are today. And so he starts using Solomon as an example, and then Jezebel. And Jezebel used her sexuality to climb to the top, basically. And how, even though Solomon had concubines and hundreds of wives and all of this kind of stuff, it was Jezebel that caused all of this, demonic behavior of Solomon and the downfall of everything. Jezebel was with I can't remember the king. Anyway, he made the king out to be just this whamsy-pamsy, not strong male. He was really, Jezebel was overpowering and, told him what to do and where to go. And then she had the sexuality and he didn't have any control over her. And it just totally goes back to the whole idea that, you get drunk at a frat party and you rape somebody. And the first thing they say was, well, what did she have on? And it's like, see, it wasn't really your fault. Yeah. And so it always goes back to, and then the women like, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't have had that spaghetti tank top on. That I just, he had no control over my modesty fault that I did. And we do, and we've been indoctrinated to that. And so, like you say, we've been indoctrinated that this is what you do. You need to support the man. The man needs to be a man. He's losing his masculinity because you're attaining too much power. And so look what's happening because of that. And now we're losing our men. The men are even becoming feminized, and it's all because of the women thinking that they need, it was just it's in our podcast. I was listening to it when I was taking a walk, but it's exactly what you're saying. It's like, there's so much fear out there right now of women having power that's going to take over the men, and the patriarchy is being even more upheld and strengthened and encouraged. And it's kind of scary to see the women that, like you say, have been indoctrinated, and they're like, yeah, you're right. I should have done that. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done that. And it's like, and sometimes they're the most vile, like you say, they're the ones that go against you the most, is the women they don't understand that you're getting your power because your man has power. And so you're not going to lose your power if he doesn't have his power. So you're going to go along with it. Like, my husband's just been made a minister, therefore I am now the queen of the congregation. So I will support him because I'm going to get my power from the power that he's been given.
Oh, that's such a good point, because I talk often. By the way, I did have to look it up because it's been a while since I've heard the Jezebel story, and I don't study the Bible like I used to, but it was King Ahab.
That's what it was.
The interesting thing about that story, and many of the stories in the Bible, without fail, every one of the stories about women in the Bible have been rewritten to emphasize the patriarchal role, to somehow support the role of the patriarchy. I'm going to start doing some content on that as well, because I think there's oftentimes a lot of times when people are trying to deconstruct, you're holding on to some of those stories like, well, what about, even though oftentimes I teach about the Bible as being the writers of the Bible, I believe, would be aghast to think that we are holding people hostage to a literal interpretation of that scripture. Because even those writers understood that they wrote in largesse and hyperbole for a reason. They made the stories magnificently huge and outrageous to catch your attention and help you remember them. And it was an invitation for us to say, let's continue the story. Please continue the story, because here's how we understand spirituality now. Here's how we understand where we are, and we're trying to figure out these things around us. So help continue to tell the story of what's happening. But as soon as people got a hold of it and said, well, we can make this really powerful if we change the narrative. So, I've got people in my family who believe that the King James Bible is the only Bible that matters, which to me is it's the same people who say you must take everything that's written in the Bible literally, even though the King James Bible wasn't written until the 1600s. So how can that even be? You can't even reconcile the two if that Bible wasn't written, and it was clearly written and retranslated and negotiated to do nothing but support monarchical rule. Right. And if that isn't entrenched in patriarchy, I don't know what is. Yeah. So you have to look at the Bible through that lens. And so anytime somebody comes to me and wants to say, well, Paul wrote that women shouldn't teach. Yeah. We're just not going to be held hostage anymore by that. I don't debate anybody. I leave all that up to Dan McClellan to do, because I want people to understand that you do not have to be held hostage, the fact that you're trying to negotiate where you are with your spirituality to people who have weaponized that book to the point that they believe that you are less than for not believing like they do, is not, you can never reconcile that starting point. You will never be able to reconcile the fact that that's going to be an equal playing field. So do not agree to have that conversation. If this is about your spirituality, then you tell them what the starting point is going to be. And oftentimes then they won't want to talk to you because they believe that they have the right to say, this is the way we're going to have this conversation. And it's going to start with the book of Romans. And we're going to say what Paul said about you and why you are less than a man.
Right.
I'm not going to start there. That's not fair. But what you also said about a woman's proximity to power, and what I often teach about is carrying water for the patriarchy.
Yes.
And that is exactly what that is. So even though I am content, what that means is I am content with the fact that I will never rise to that level of power. The power that I get by being in proximity, like you said, the pastor's wife, that gets me so close to that power that I'm willing to dump water on the people who are on this structure. I'm going to carry it up the system, dump it on people who may be trying to get up to my power or threaten it in some way, because this is just a good life. And I'm going to keep my proximity to power and ensure my husband stays in power. Mm-hmm. So they then become a tool in the patriarchy. And oftentimes I'll talk about, like the absence, and this is something that I know that I think we were going to talk a little bit about in this podcast about the divine feminine and the crone, the absence of the divine feminine, the absence of that's being suffocated by toxic masculinity right now. When I talk about that, people will say, what are you talking about? You've got Marjorie Taylor Greene, you've got Nancy Pelosi, you've got Lauren Boebert, you've got Marsha Blackburn, all these people in there. No, even Nancy is part of a patriarchal structure. Mm-hmm. They're part of it. They're working in cooperation with it. Divine feminine isn't about saying that being masculine is wrong. Divine feminine is saying that we need to accept the sides of us that are more nurturing and a little bit more diplomatic, that bring in those energies that make things look a little bit more compassionate and empathic, that have nothing to do with gender, but everything to do with an element of us that's in each of us that really is all of that gets suffocated in a patriarchal structure that's entrenched in this toxic masculinity. And that's the other part of it. And you start to, a lot of that is like, wait, I am so lost, because it's so overwhelming to think, but it's also oftentimes people are, they immediately go, oh my God, I'm getting it. I'm getting it. I'm mm-hmm. starting to understand completely what you're talking about. But you don't want to overwhelm people to the point where they'll be like, I don't believe any of this.
Right.
In reality, it's our lives. It's just, and people are awakening to it, especially the younger generations.
Well, that brings me to the next question. So because you're on TikTok and then also Instagram, do you do Facebook anymore as much? Do you have things that just kind of flow over automatically?
I do. It's just all repurposed content.
Right. Do you find there is a demographic of people that follow you, that you do have a younger generation of women that follow you, or are you finding women in our demographic that are finally a voice for my people? Are you finding that, or when you get comments, do you know of like the general age group of people that are commenting on your posts?
Yes. So it's really interesting, and this might make some people uncomfortable, some of your followers uncomfortable, but I think this is something we should talk about. Mm-hmm. On Facebook, I do have an older audience. Instagram is about 50-50. TikTok is a younger audience, but the demographics are shifting up a little bit. I think more boomers are finding their way to TikTok. But the one thing that I would say, that you would think that, I might have an evangelical come in there every once in a while and drop a comment, and I can use that, like you said, Tim can push back on. It's just a great teaching moment. If a Christian wants to come in and try to make a point inside my comments. But the ones who get the most offended is the white woman who's coming in, who thinks that she's deconstructing. Mm-hmm. But I have said something that has struck a nerve about her person, that she wants me to change my thinking, instead of, she does not see the mirror I am offering her, to see that I have been right where you are, and to face that mirror, to say that we exist in a space of privilege, and that we have been taught to wield that privilege in every place that we go, in the form of gatekeeping, in the way that we say things about, well, I don't care about being in the same space with LGBTQIA+, but do they have to have public displays of affection? It makes me uncomfortable. That's gatekeeping. That's a patriarchal belief that I have the right to say how communities are going to exist, or how people are going to dress, or how they're going to speak, and what words they will use. You hear that often when it comes to demographics and certain words and dialects that people use depending on what part of the geographical region they are from in America. Mm-hmm. And people will say, well, can you speak proper English? Or can you, that is a form of gatekeeping. Now it trends in far beyond women into places where, for instance, it was just not too long ago, a man came into my space and said, I will talk to you when you calm down. Oh. Now he's in my space, dropping comments, and I made a video about it. And I immediately went to that and said, are you really coming to a woman's space and talking? It was like, thank you for doing this. You're healing when you can take something that somebody says and be able to then transpose it and say, let me tell you what this man just did. And why telling you that calming down is actually a control of patriarchy, because he's going to try to come into my space and put the conditions about how we're going to communicate with each other, using a weapon that patriarchy taught him was his to use towards a woman. So when I was able to use that, I had women DMing me saying, I'm sitting here in tears. I always knew I felt so horrible when somebody said that to me, but I didn't know I had the right to do that. I was always felt like that was such a horrible thing to say to me. And now I have the words to say back to somebody when they say that. And then later, that man actually reached out and apologized. He said, I never understood how that harms women. Thank you for teaching me. He did.
That's amazing.
I said, stay in this space for as long as you want. And if you ever have questions, come in. Now, I haven't talked to him since, but the fact that he reached out and apologized was unbelievable.
Yeah, it's so amazing, because you talk about that, and that's I think it was either Tim or somebody else, but they showed a couple of clips of men saying how we can't have women in positions of authority, and it was the whole, like to say, it's like, is it 2024? Are you sure it's not 1953? Are you sure? Because they were saying, we can't have women because they're too nurturous, and they want to involve everyone, and they believe in diversity, and they believe in inclusion. And how can you have somebody in power that is so kind to everyone? And then the first thing I thought of was Travis Kelce at the Super Bowl in his coach's face, just yelling at him. And I'm like, yes, that's what we need in authority. Somebody that's just going to chop your head off, because you didn't put him in that play. And I'm like, let's balance that out. But the tone police, I mean, immediately you get that for women is like, well, I didn't like your tone. Mm-hmm. And it's like, or you're just, why are you so angry? I'm like, because you just insulted me. And it's like, well, you should be able to handle that. Like, men don't have emotion. It's amazing. But I love what you said about once you've healed, then you're able to handle that. And that's what I see in your TikToks is your very calm ability to take what they said, or even like when women will make comments and you'll say what you really meant was, and you repeat it back. And it's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
But
I still get accused of being, oh, you're just angry and hurt. And there was a time when that really stung. And now, because it's like, no, I'm not. Like, no, I'm not. I can now use this as a teaching moment. But I think that you'll start to see, you just said something that I want to help people start to see, is this whole thing about, well, you're too angry. You need to calm down. You need to gather yourself before we can have a conversation. The range of emotions that's available to humans should be utilized. Can they all contribute to a productive conversation? Maybe not. But as we understand the human condition, the reason we are given this, whether you believe in divine creation or you believe in evolution, we have evolved to have this bucket of human emotion. Anger is a signal that something is off, just like sadness is, or joy, or whatever, or fear. It's all part of who we are. Now, when I know that I am completely off center and I'm not grounded, this is not a time for me to have a productive conversation, because I might go into places that aren't productive for this conversation. That whole thing is about how we look at our coping range. And we don't have to get too psychological today. But once you've been on a healing journey, you start to know that about yourself. And you also know that you're better off and will be more prepared when you turn this anger that you're feeling into a place of empowerment. But when somebody tells you that you are angry, you check yourself. Oftentimes that's coming from a place of them trying to control you. And if you're just in the tone that I'm talking to you and talking about this, I will get people like, well, I'm not going to talk to you, because it's a confidence, and it might come off as either aggressive or assertive, because you're not used to hearing a woman speak about empowerment. So when a woman speaks with that kind of confidence from people who aren't used to hearing it, I'll be told I'm arrogant, or I have an anger inside me. You burn with a hostility, and I'm not feeling any of that. I'm feeling like so grounded and empowered and speaking from a place of truth. And when you do that, you feel it. You feel it through your entire body. But they're not used to that. So it's about internalizing and being able to check yourself, and not letting somebody else tone police you to the point where you then are dismissed by somebody else's experience, or somebody else trying to control you. Because especially women our age, all generations are still being impacted by patriarchy. We have had so many narratives placed on us about what a woman's role was, what a responsibility, how are we described and defined, and what our expectations are for our lives. And when we have stepped out of those, we have been corrected so many different times. And I speak a lot about that in my book as well. But I think that is the hardest part about being able to say, I no longer want that narrative on me. And now who am I? Who am I without that narrative of what I've been wearing my entire life? And being able to take those off and then step into your authenticity is exciting. It doesn't matter what age you are to be able to do that.
I'm glad you addressed that. How do you respond to and I hear this in every kind of marginalization throughout history. Well, we don't do that anymore. Well, that was in the past. Look how far we've come. And last year I interviewed a lady because She actually spoke at this conference that I went to with my husband, which was a faith promoting conference for the Mormon church. And she talked about the joy of, at least in the Mormon church, we believe and teach that we have a mother in heaven. And so isn't that great? And we should celebrate the fact that we believe that there is a mother in heaven. And so I interviewed her and I said, how does it make you feel when you're standing on the same stage with a woman who is in her 70s, who was asked to step down from an organization because she gave a talk on Mother in Heaven and it offended some people? So she was asked to step down from this organization that she belonged to in the church. And then you're on the same stage going, look at all this art that they created. And look, we displayed this art and it was all, it was Mother in Heaven in all different diverse colors. And look how far we've come. And I'm like, then there was this man who spoke in General Conference a couple of months ago and said how we don't speak of our Mother in Heaven. We don't pray to our Mother in Heaven. And we really should stop talking about it because we don't know anything about Mother in Heaven. So just zip, 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 But you, being a 41-year-old, think that we've come so far. Look how far we've come. And it's like, historically, we have not come very far. But you're this new generation that thinks just because you can have artwork displayed in a college part of the college campus about a Mother in Heaven, that the church is now like, yes, here we are. We're all here now, So let it go. Just let it go. And it's like, but we lived the time that we were told to come home, that I lived the sitting in a congregation, listening to my male apostle tell me, you have no business working outside of the home. You should not be seeking for a career. Your job is to have children. Your job is to make heaven on earth in a home, so that when everyone returns from their daily responsibilities, they have this peaceful place to come home to that you have created for them. That is your job. Well, they don't say that anymore. Aren't you glad they don't say that anymore? So how do you respond to well, we don't say that anymore, so get over it. That's the hard part about being old, is like, we were in the room. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. And so I don't have the Mormon experience, but when I'm hearing that story, what that tells me is this young person's training is through patriarchy. Mm-hmm. And the farther away you can get from those seasons of oppression, they are doing a great job of rebranding themselves and not connecting to their past, which I think that's what my video today is about, because what I am seeing a lot of people who are still church talking over the unchurched, as if the priority is to get people back in church, but the ones who are unchurched are a threat. So how do you get to the people who are just thinking and not sure where they're going? And so I kind of laid a claim there to say, no, don't talk over us. We're here too, and we have a right to this space. And it's not to be a churched space. So when it comes to I think what I'm sensing in those spaces is where those of us who experienced it, we must find our voices. We must be the ones who educate them, but also the younger generations need to have a willingness. Now, I think you're seeing that. Again, I don't know about the Mormon experience, but I think you are seeing that. I'm seeing it in social media, and it could be because that's the silo I'm in activism and deconstructing and Christian nationalism. But because there's this whole thing about making sure that deconstructing is about understanding what privilege religious patriarchy taught you about how you fit into the world and how you're carrying these buckets of water and how many times you dump it on people without even realizing how many times we're trained to walk into the room as the white savior, that we're the smartest person in the room. And those kinds of things, thinking about those elements that we don't even think about, and that I didn't leave the church thinking about. So how I make sure that I'm aware of those spaces. But what that also means is I'm going to take that to like a place of, when we talk about the problems that we still have with systemic racism and sexism and homophobia inside our systems. When people say, well, we now ordain gay clergy, so we're over that. We absolutely are not over that.
Right.
Racism and sexism and homophobia still sit in the church pews. So it's not that we have to just say, well, that ideal is dying out. It isn't. There's still indoctrination inside familial structures, inside education, inside those places that are still dropping those isms inside people. And one of those isms is not an ism, it's ignorance. So when someone gets up and says, oh, well, thank God we're not doing that anymore, when there are thousands of humans that have still been impacted by it, and its connection to the church is still there. The church is not so modern that hasn't come a far way. Last time I checked, I'm not seeing too many women leaders inside the Mormon church. It looks pretty white and it looks pretty male to me. Yes. So how far actually are you away from all of that ideology? And it's the same thing when you look at the skewed leadership of our political arena. If it looked anything like our demographics in America, it would be more women, it would be more Black, and it would be more Hispanics than what it is. But we're still seeing it through a dominant white male culture. But what they've done is be able to sever the history and hide it. And that is pure marketing. That is pure branding. And it sounds like it's working. And that's what's really sad when we say, oh, we don't do that anymore. No, it's hiding behind that church band. It's hiding behind the pastor in jeans. They can modernize it however they want. The toxic theology is still there. And I think it is up to us to call it out, to say, no, we still have to be accountable to the fact that the very church that says they're modernizing still is not going. There's churches out there who have the pastor in jeans aren't going to ordain gay clergy. They're not going to officiate a same-sex marriage, and they're not even going. Some of them are not going to ordain women.
Right.
The theology is still there. So it is about that accountability. So that paintings are harmless, and how many people are going to see it? It's really the education. That's kind of that. Yes, it's something to celebrate, but it's a far cry from actually the huge paradigm shift that the church needs.
Absolutely. So let's finish off by talking about the book that you have coming out. What would you say? Did you take a subject for each chapter and address the deconstruction process? Or how did you lay your book out?
I did. So I tell my story in examples in each of the chapters, and it's part memoir, part story, or part healing journey, and then each chapter has contemplative, inspirational questions, reflective questions to help you on your journey. One of the things I'm cautious in saying is that there is no path, as I said at the beginning, and where you end up is different for each person. I don't proselytize that, and I don't proselytize it in the book. So you're not going to read a lot about what I believe and where I am, because I don't believe that that's my responsibility. What's my responsibility is to help you understand that there's a reason that you're questioning your faith and your religious experiences. And here's some ways that I can help you understand what you're going through. So I have a section where we're talking about deconstructing. Then I have a section where I'm talking about restoring. And that's really about looking at, do you have religious trauma? And trauma is often intermixed. And how is that still impacting our lives and the filter through which we see our experience? I talk about soul work and the importance of making sure that you are taking responsibility for how you're showing up in the world. In other words, when people offer you a mirror about something that may be something we're carrying that limits our capacity for compassion and empathy, and we instead knock the mirror out repeatedly, that might be a cue that there are some wounds that we're holding on to. I talk about integrating the true self and silencing the ego. So I do go into the mystical a little bit with this. So the first part's deconstructing. The second part is restoring that foundation for not just your spiritual growth, but your emotional well-being. And then the last part is about reconstructing. And I'm sorry, those words are where we are. And that's where I talk about ways that you can bring elements of practical spirituality, and how do you find holy in your everyday if being unchurched is your journey, or where you can start to look for a spiritual community. I talk about how you can look at Jesus with a new set of eyes. You don't have to, what do you do about Jesus when you're deconstructing? I mean, that was a hard one for me. How do I look at the Bible differently? I mean, it's just like, how am I rejecting the core elements of my identity, not just what I believe, but my identity, and who am I if I'm not what the Bible says I am, or what I believed about Jesus. And then understanding that I didn't have to throw that out. I could reconnect with a different heart and a different set of eyes that not only that has nothing to do with a belief system. So there's a lot of information there, lots of resources, a whole glossary of things that I use. So I think I'm excited about it. It's we go into pre-order, I think next week. I can't keep dates straight.
Okay, that's what I was just going to ask, is if you can pre-order it, and then you think that it will be released. Let's see, it's almost March. When do you think it'll be released?
It'll be released late summer, early fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. That's so exciting. And then the most exciting part is that you're going to kind of go on a book tour, right? Yes.
I am. I'm very excited about that. And I will be reaching out to people to say, hey, would you like to help me? So I'll be back in touch with you. There might be a place where I can have a book signing and a talk in your area. I will be traveling the country. I know my publisher is putting together some stuff for that right now. So yeah, I'll be on a big book tour. I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited about it too, because I think that there is, it's interesting, in the Mormon church, you have a lot of life coaches, and a lot of these women, their clientele are either ex-Mormon women or women who want to deconstruct, but they're still in that fear stage where I don't want to upset my husband. I don't want to upset my children, my mother. We're 7th-generation Mormon pioneers, and I don't want to be the one that messed up the thing. And then you've got a little bit of that voice in the back of their heads that are like, you're the one that pulled the thread, and now generations after you will be all in hell because of what you've done. Yeah. So there's that indoctrination. So they're literally going to life coaches, into therapy, to figure out, because they're so depressed and they don't have a journey. They're just lost. They're just lost because they don't know how to deconstruct, and maybe still, like you say, keep a faith in some kind of spirituality, if it's a belief in Jesus or whatever. And they're afraid of losing the community, because that is big in the LDS church, is the community. And they're afraid they're going to lose that. And then what will I do? And who will I be? And what am I? And they've lost their identity, and especially if they've held positions of authority. So it's just amazing. So I love that your book is about the deconstruction process, but then here's how maybe we can get back to find yourself. So.
Yeah. And it's crazy, because I've even got what part 2 of that book looks like now. It really came to me in like one big download, like, oh my gosh, I did not see that coming. I haven't started writing it yet, but it's coming. But the book is called Deconstructing, Leaving Church, Finding Faith.
Okay.
And it'll be pre-order next week, I think, on all the national
Amazon, all of that. Okay.
Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, the whole thing.
Okay. And then Rev.Karla is how they're going to find you on TikTok, Instagram, all of those.
Rev.Karla with a K, and Rev.Karla.com is my website.
Okay. And I really encourage you to go. Now, I know a lot of you people are believing all this hoo-ha about TikTok. but I just want you to know that Facebook has all of your data already. So you don't have to worry about TikTok.
They do.
It's like they've already grabbed all your information. They've bugged your home. Alexa has everything you did last night already recorded. So don't be afraid of going on TikTok. TikTok, what I love about TikTok, it really is almost like a master class. Everyone, besides me, I still get on there and just rant, with absolutely no direction. But most of the people that get on there, it's you're being taught something.
Yes.
And it's phenomenal. I mean, the education that you can get from listening to a 10-minute TikTok is amazing.
It's unreal. I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. It's so much fun.
Yeah. So please go ahead, sign up for TikTok. It's worth it, if nothing else, just to listen to Rev.Karla.
Thank you
So
so
thank
much.
you for joining me today. It's just, it was just the highlight of my life. So
it has absolutely been an honor.
Yeah. And I'm really excited about your book tour. And like I said, I will be there to carry books out of the back of the station wagon and carry them in.
I'll be calling you.
All right. Oh my gosh, is she not amazing? I told you. And I love what she said about at one point she was talking about how at first she thought maybe she just needed to find another church. And so she was searching for another church until she realized the patriarchy was behind all of these systems. And I love how she refers to the new pastor in jeans. That's the new church, is the pastor in jeans. But she'll say, if you think that they're teaching anything differently, they're not. So it's absolutely amazing. So thank you for joining me today. I'm really pleased that I could bring this to your attention. As you can tell from the post that she had made, this was made, this is October. I probably made this in the spring originally. And so I think now that her book is out and is available and you can purchase it, I really wanted to highlight Rev.Karla again. So remember, this is her book, Rev.Karla's new book, Deconstructing, Leaving Church, Finding Faith. It's available anywhere that you purchase your books. And her website is Rev.Karla.com with the K, Karla with the K. And so you can find her there. She has a lot of spirituality and lessons in spirituality. And she even has like a Sunday gathering type thing. So if you're looking for something that this has been your paradigm and you're uncomfortable with not knowing what will I do if I don't have my routine that I've done for 50 years, she has something there for you. So I hope you've enjoyed this today. I certainly enjoyed bringing it back and hearing. I wish that her internet would have been a little bit better because it was a little bit distracting. I hope it didn't distract you because her message was still very clear. So thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you again. Most importantly, I want you to please like and subscribe. Mostly subscribe. I know everybody says that, right? It's just the way the algorithm works. And I have so many fabulous followers. I have over 31,000 followers on TikTok. I have over 100,000 followers on Instagram. And so I know you're out there. You just have to push subscribe. And so let's get the views up, especially for women in my demographic. Ladies, you are visible. You have purpose. You have value. We need to hear more voices in my demographic. So please push like, subscribe, and share. I have so many people. You guys, this is a very often experience for me. I will have people in their 50s. They'll come up to me in the gym or something, start a conversation, and they'll say, "How old are you?" And then I'll say, "Well, I'm 70." And they'll go, "Oh, you would love my mother. I've got to get you together with my mother." And I'm like, "So we can't be friends? Are we not going to be friends now? Somehow I got delegated to someone that I don't meet, but I'm really having a great conversation with you. Share this with your mother. If you think that this is a good match, share, like, and subscribe with your mother. All right. If that's what we have to do, that's what we have to do. So thank you for joining me today. And we will see you again next time on She Became Visible.